Early 2024. A doctor's office in London. An 85-year-old man sits down for what should have been a routine preterm physical. 40 minutes later, he was told he had cancer. He had no symptoms, no family history, no warning. And for the next 12 months, the man you grew up watching told absolutely nobody. Stay with me, because what he hid for a year is the part that hurts most. His name is Sir Cliff Richard, the British pop legend with over 250 million records sold worldwide. The third highest selling singles artist in UK chart history, behind only the Beatles and Elvis Presley. And in early 2024, he was 84 years old and about to fly to Australia and New Zealand for another tour. That tour required a medical exam. He almost treated it as paperwork, but the results came back wrong. The prostate cancer was localized, caught before it could move into his bones or his lymph nodes. That part was lucky. According to his own words on ITV's Good Morning Britain on December 15, 2025, the disease was not very old when they found it. Then came 12 months of quiet treatment, 12 months of scans, blood tests, specialist appointments, 12 months of walking on stage, smiling at audiences, signing autographs. While carrying a secret most men his age would have told the entire world. He told no one, not his fans, not the press, not the millions who had heard his voice on Christmas radio every December since 1988. Why? Because at 85, after everything he had already lost, Cliff Richard had learned exactly what happens when cameras find out something private about you before you are ready. Pause. He had learned it the hard way. He had learned it in August 2014. And to understand why he hid this, why a man who has spent 7 decades on television suddenly decided silence was safer than headlines, you have to go back to the morning a helicopter showed up over an empty apartment in Berkshire. August 14, 2014. A Thursday morning over Sunningdale, Berkshire. The sky is quiet. Until it isn't. A helicopter starts circling above an apartment complex called Charters Estate. Police cars pull into the driveway. Officers from South Yorkshire Police step out with a search warrant. The owner of that apartment isn't home. He is 2,000 kilometers away in Portugal, at his vineyard in the Algarve. He has no idea his name is about to be on every screen in Britain. B-roll. Aerial shot of suburban English neighborhood. Faint helicopter audio. Inside that helicopter, BBC cameras are rolling. The corporation had been tipped off the day before. They had time to plan. They sent reporters to his homes in Portugal and Barbados. They hired the aircraft. They lined up the exclusive. Then they broadcasted live. 44 separate BBC television broadcasts on day 1. 15 more on day 2. Each one repeating the same story. Police were searching the home of Sir Cliff Richard over a historical child sex abuse allegation. Sir Cliff was 73 years old. He found out the way the country found out from a screen. Friends were calling him in Portugal. Strangers watched live cameras at his front door while he stood overseas, trying to understand what was being said about him. He had never been told. He had never been questioned. He had never been arrested. The allegation, according to court records, came from a man who claimed Cliff had assaulted him as a child at a Billy Graham religious event at Sheffield United's Bramall Lane Stadium decades earlier. Cliff denied it from day 1. 22 months later, in June 2016, prosecutors confirmed there would be no charges. The investigation was over, but the damage was done. He later told the High Court he spent 2 years in what he called creative limbo. 2 years where every audition, every offer, every interview started with the same unspoken question hanging in the room. Before I go any further, I need to ask you something, because this part affects all of us. Should a journalist be allowed to broadcast the name of a person who has only been accused, not arrested, not charged, not even questioned? Or should that name be protected until a court actually says so? There is no neutral answer to that. I want yours. Drop it in the comments below. I read every one. Because in 2018, after a 13-day trial, Mr. Justice Anthony Mann ruled the BBC had infringed Sir Cliff's privacy in a serious and sensationalist way. Cliff was awarded £210,000 in damages. The BBC paid £850,000 in legal costs. South Yorkshire Police had already settled separately for £400,000. He won, but winning had a price. The case cost Sir Cliff £3.4 million to fight. To clear his own name, he spent more money than most people will earn in a lifetime. And when the cameras finally turned off and the headlines moved on, when Sir Cliff walked back into his apartment as a cleared man, there was only one person who had truly held him steady through all of it. The same man who had lived in his house for 30 years. His name was Bill Latham. And to understand who Bill was to Cliff, you have to go back to the early 1960s. Bill was a religious studies teacher. Cliff was a young pop star who had just become Britain's answer to Elvis Presley. They met somewhere in that gap between Bill's classroom and Cliff's recording studio. And what started as a friendship turned into something almost no celebrity ever gets, a person who knew him before the fame and stayed long after it. In the 1960s, Bill introduced Cliff to the Christian faith that would shape every decision he made for the next 60 years. He led him to American evangelist Billy Graham. He pulled him out of the rock and roll lifestyle his record label had built around him. And eventually, Bill left teaching altogether to help manage Cliff's career. Then he moved in. For 30 years, from the 1960s until 1996, Bill Latham lived inside Sir Cliff's mansion in Weybridge, Surrey. Bill's girlfriend lived there with them. They shared meals. They shared tours. They shared a faith the British tabloids could never quite understand. The press wrote what the press writes. They invented stories about what kind of bond two men could possibly have under one roof for that long. Cliff has answered them publicly more than once. He is not gay. Marriage, he has said, is sacred to him. The truth about Bill was simpler than the headlines wanted. They were brothers in faith. Bill retired from Cliff's management team at the end of 2010. He moved out of the mansion, but he never moved out of Cliff's life. And here is the part that breaks something open. In December 2022, Bill Latham went into hospital. He was 84. His health had been quietly failing for weeks. Cliff visited him in those final days, sat with him, and in the early hours of one cold morning, Bill was gone. On December 29, 2022, Sir Cliff posted on Facebook. He didn't release a statement through his publicist. He didn't go on a morning show. He wrote it himself. The first 3 words he wrote were, "Yet another loss. Yet another." Because by then, Cliff had been writing tributes for years to Olivia Newton-John, to old bandmates, to friends who had simply run out of time. But this one was different. He wrote that Bill was the one who led him onto the spiritual path that changed my life fully and completely. He wrote that Bill was someone you could reliably lean on, and I did many times. Then he closed it. God bless you, Bill. You deserve your rest in peace. The man who had stood beside him for 60 years was gone. The faith they had shared was still there. But the person Cliff had quietly built his inner life around, the one who knew the man behind the rock star, was no longer on the other end of any phone. And that is when the houses started feeling bigger. When Sir Cliff isn't on tour, he splits his time between 3 homes. The first is in Barbados, a property called Coral Sundown, in the exclusive Sugar Hill Estate. 6 bedrooms, 2.5 acres of land, tennis courts, 2 swimming pools, marble flooring. He bought the plot in the 1990s and built it from scratch. For 3 summers in a row starting in 2003. Then, Prime Minister Tony Blair brought his family there on holiday. In late 2017, Sir Cliff listed the villa for £6.8 million. The second home is in Portugal, a quiet vineyard estate in the Algarve, surrounded by olive trees and hills that catch the sunset in a way most postcards can't capture. He has owned it for decades. He bottles his own wine there. The third is in England, a country he has lived in, performed in, paid taxes in, and been knighted by. By any measure that exists, Sir Cliff Richard has won at life. Over 250 million records sold worldwide. A knighthood in 1995, making him the first rock star to ever receive one. An OBE before that. 3 Brit Awards. 2 Ivor Novello Awards. 68 years of charting singles. And not one person waiting for him in any of the rooms. He never married. He has no children. His parents are gone. His sisters have their own lives. The man who lived in his house for 30 years is buried. The other close friend he still speaks about, an American former priest named John McEllen, whom he has known since 2001, keeps a low profile. And fame, for all of it, has never been able to keep him company at night. And this is the part where I have to stop and talk to you directly for a moment. If you have made it this far, if you're starting to see this man not as a celebrity, but as a person, then you already understand why I'm telling this story the way I am. There are entire chapters of Sir Cliff Richard's life the British press never covered properly. The friendships, the quiet years between the headlines, the decisions a man like this makes when nobody is filming. If you want me to keep telling them, hit subscribe right now. Because the story you are hearing today is one chapter of many. I'm covering the rest of them one human, honest video at a time. Don't miss the next one. Now back to the houses. 6 bedrooms in Barbados, multiple in Portugal, a flat in England. And every morning, Sir Cliff Richard wakes up in one of them, makes himself breakfast, and decides what an 85-year-old man does with a day that has no children to call, no spouse to sit across from, and no Bill Latham downstairs in the next room. He picks up the phone, he calls his band, and he books another tour. The tour was called Can't Stop Me Now. Read that again. Sit with it. The man who turned 85 last October named his 2025 concert tour after a sentence that sounded less like a slogan and more like a personal warning. To anyone wondering when he was finally going to slow down, he never did. He played through all of 2025. He sold out venues across the United Kingdom. He smiled for camera after camera, never once letting anyone know that a year earlier he had been told he had cancer. And in 2026, he announced more dates. The tour business is brutal at any age. The buses, the hotel rooms, the vocal exercises, the security. Most artists have his age struggle through a 6-week run. Cliff Richard has been doing this since 1958. You have to understand what stages have meant to this man. In 1989, he booked Wembley Stadium for what he called the event. 144,000 people showed up over 2 nights, one of the largest concerts in British history. The following year, in 1990, he played a benefit show at Knebworth. 120,000 fans. Elton John and Paul McCartney joined him. Together, they raised $10.5 million for charity in one night. That is the life he is still chasing at 85. Not because he needs the money. He has 3 homes and decades of royalty checks. He chases it because the moment those stage lights come on, he is not a man who never married. He is not a father without children. He is not the friend who buried Bill. He is not a man recovering from cancer. He is not the 73-year-old who watched a helicopter film his own front door. He is just Cliff, singing, the way he has been since he was 17 years old. And I want to talk to you for a second, because this part is going to land for some of you in a way the rest of this video hasn't. If you have ever poured yourself into work to avoid going home to a house that doesn't feel right, if you have ever loved a job because it was easier than loving a quiet evening alone, you already know what Sir Cliff is doing. You don't need to be a millionaire or a knight of the realm to understand what it means to keep moving, so the grief can't quite catch you. We all have a stage of some kind. If this part has hit you somewhere personal, tell me about it in the comments. You would be surprised how many in this community are feeling the same thing tonight. That's what makes this channel different. In the summer of 2025, between shows, Cliff spent the full Wimbledon fortnight as a member of the All England Club. He donated 4 oil paintings of female tennis legends to the Wimbledon Museum. He posted his daily outfits on Facebook. He kept moving. He kept smiling. And then, on a cold December morning, he sat down in front of a television camera at ITV, and he told the country what he had been hiding for an entire year. December 15th, 2025. ITV Studios, London. The Good Morning Britain set returns from a commercial break, and a familiar face is sitting across from the presenter. It is Sir Cliff Richard, 85 years old, in a soft jacket and a small smile. The presenter is Dermot Murnaghan, a respected British journalist who himself is living with advanced prostate cancer. Two men, two stages of the same disease. Live on national television. That is when Cliff said it. He revealed he had been diagnosed during a routine pre-tour health check earlier in 2024. The cancer had not spread to his bones. It had been caught early. He had quietly undergone 12 months of treatment. Then he gave the country the line they were waiting for. The cancer's gone at the moment. The headlines led with that sentence. Most articles stopped quoting there. But Cliff did not stop talking. The very next sentence, the one almost nobody pulled into a headline, was this: "I don't know whether it's going to come back." Read that twice. A man at 85 on live television telling the entire United Kingdom that the disease he just beat could come back tomorrow, next month, or next year. And he has no way to know. He said it calmly, without his voice breaking. He said it on national television because he had decided, quietly, during those 12 secret months of treatment, that his platform was worth more than his privacy. He used the rest of the interview to push for one thing: a national PSA screening program for British men. NHS advisors had recently rejected routine screening for men aged 45 to 70, even though earlier detection could save around 1,500 lives a year. Then he turned, on camera, to King Charles III, who himself had been treated for a prostate condition earlier in 2025. If the king was willing to lead the campaign, Cliff said, he would gladly join him. The man who once filled Wembley with 144,000 fans was now standing quietly, alone, at 85, asking a king to stand with him for one last cause. Not for the music, not for the fame, for men he would never meet, who might still be alive next Christmas because he decided to talk. And that is how he lives now, in 3 houses he can't quite fill, with a faith that outlived the friend who taught it to him, on stages he refuses to walk away from, with a cancer that may or may not return, and with a voice, at 85, still being used to save the lives of strangers. If this story hit you somewhere tonight, don't let it end here. The next video on this channel is already up, and it is one of the most difficult stories I've ever told. Click it now. Watch it through. Some stories aren't the kind you scroll past, because some lives deserve to be remembered properly. And Sir Cliff Richard, for all of it, is one of them.